Many videos suggest not comparing ourselves to others or not worrying about what others think. However, our brains don't quite function that way. Perhaps the real issue isn't comparison itself, but the specific standards we've come to set for ourselves. We might wonder why we constantly find ourselves using others as a standard, and why these comparisons sometimes challenge our emotions and self-esteem. Let's first explore the underlying structure of this experience. I won't ask you to stop comparing. That's because realistically, it can feel almost impossible. Instead, I'd like to offer a different question. Perhaps what we truly need to change isn't the habit of comparing ourselves, but where we choose to set our standards for comparison in life. Often, a lot of our stress tends to stem from this very point. Comparison is a fundamental human function. It's an instinct that helps us assess potential risks and understand where we stand. We might wonder if we're doing well, if we're lagging, or if we're simply okay. Comparison is simply one part of this natural process of self-assessment. When I hear that someone has been promoted, it's natural for me to compare it with my own journey. Thoughts like, why am I not there yet? Or, what am I doing? Often come up. Sometimes shifting away from these reflections can be quite challenging. It's not that comparing ourselves is the issue. What truly matters is where we choose to set our standards. Yet, sometimes, without realizing it, our standards naturally begin to look outwards. External standards often miss crucial information, things like a person's unique background, their starting point, or the journey they've taken. We only see the results, yet we often use them solely to evaluate ourselves. When I see someone else doing better, I tend to feel a bit inadequate. And if someone appears to be struggling, I might feel a sense of being okay. My emotions can really swing depending on these comparisons. Even though my circumstances haven't changed, my feelings often go up and down. If our standards are external, it's hard to truly rest. We may constantly compare ourselves to others. Even while resting, our minds can feel tense. We tend to believe our judgments are objective. However, we often end up using very unstable standards. This is simply because we base them on what we cannot control. We cannot control the pace or results of others. If our benchmarks are things we cannot control, anxiety can continue. Even with our best efforts, we may not find stability. When we compare things a lot, it might seem like we'll become more accurate in our assessments, yet often our judgment can actually feel more uncertain instead. This is because the standards we use for comparison tend to constantly shift. Therefore, a question is needed. It's not really about whether we make comparisons, but more about where we choose to place our standards for those comparisons. Our comparison standards aren't fixed. They're not something we're born knowing. Instead, they're closer to choices we've made habitually. This means we can choose different standards. A more stable way to compare yourself, surprisingly, is quite simple. It's not about others, it's about time itself. You can compare yourself to your past self, who you were yesterday or last month. My memories of my past self feel quite clear. The environment and conditions were quite similar. This allows me to make a fair comparison. When I focus on what I can control as my standard, my anxiety tends to lessen. My efforts feel more connected to the outcomes, which helps my mind become more stable. The desire to compare doesn't just go away, and it doesn't need to disappear. We can simply change its direction. Comparison isn't necessarily a bad habit, it can be a source of energy. It's the driving force that helps us understand where we stand and detect changes. The real issue often lies in how we choose to use it. We turn the direction of this energy not towards others, but towards who we were yesterday. Even though comparisons might naturally arise, the important thing is to shift our measuring standard. My perception of myself feels much clearer now. Even the smallest changes are clearly visible. My decisions feel much simpler now. Even if the achievements aren't big, changes are still there. Direction is more important than speed. Small changes accumulate. Self-esteem is more connected to feeling in control rather than the outcomes of comparison. It becomes stable and secure when you feel you can manage things. I start to shift my attention from others and focus on observing my own changes. It feels like confirming what's happening rather than evaluating it. The meaning of comparison itself begins to change. It's not about who is ahead anymore. We begin to observe our own personal evolution. Emotional drain is also reduced. It's perfectly fine if it's not a grand achievement. Perhaps you woke up 10 minutes earlier today, or maybe you did the exercise you missed, or you felt a little less frustrated today. Even these small things are clearly progress. It's perfectly fine if your day didn't feel like it had any noticeable changes. If you felt less anxious than yesterday, that in itself is a shift. Maintaining a sense of calm and stability can also be a meaningful kind of growth. To move beyond comparison isn't about stopping it entirely. It's more about where you place your standards for comparison. Even if today felt much like yesterday, that's perfectly okay. Just the intention to compare yourself with your own past self rather than with others is already a meaningful step in a new and positive direction.